Good evening, class. Tonight's lecture is going to be about tarot management, another root of evil actions. Your RQ-DQ for this week is tarot management, fear of death, another root of evil actions? And then you were required to read McGregor's Tarot Management and Aggression, evident that morality salient motivates aggression against worldview threatening others, and then you were only to focus on experiment 1 and ignore experiments 2 to 4. We're going to begin class by watching this video, Death Anxiety, Exploring the Fear of Dying through Tarot Management Theory.
Let's take a brief look at human existence. To put it simply, we are born, we live, and then we die. How do you feel when you consider the inevitability of death? The most commonly experienced feeling is fear, and this can lead to death anxiety, a persisting, abnormal fear of dying where the individual has feelings of worry, anxiety, and dread, which disrupt daily functioning. The major problem of death anxiety is that it can impact on all aspects of life. There are, however, effective ways of coping to avoid becoming emotionally overwhelmed. Usually, this is unconsciously done for us by the buffering systems proposed by Tarot Management Theory, or TMT. These psychological buffers include cultural worldviews, a set of culturally appropriate morals, standards, and values, self-esteem, which provides individuals uniqueness, and meaningful interpersonal relationships, which give a sense of purpose. Collectively, these allow an individual to perceive their existence as significant despite their fear of dying. TMT is the most prominent and well-supported theory of death anxiety. It proposes that death anxiety is due to the inconsistency between our evolutionary drive to survive and our awareness of death. Death anxiety has multiple contributing factors, so it is difficult for the buffering systems to always function efficiently. When they do become overwhelmed, vast negative consequences can occur, including anxiety disorders, phobias, depression, somatic symptom disorder, obsessive-compulsive disorder, and eating disorders. Beyond these psychological issues, withdrawal behaviours can also occur, which are evident in workplace death anxiety. Poor concentration, running late to work, absenteeism, and turnover are all consequences of the stress and strain that death anxiety causes. So with all of these significant issues occurring, we must ask, how can we protect ourselves from the negative effects of death anxiety? TMT proposes that some individuals can deal with death anxiety by ignoring mortality cues and focusing their attention on other areas of their lives, such as work. This has been supported by findings that generative behaviours can reduce death anxiety. However, the multidimensional nature of death anxiety affects whether the awareness of dying leads to either fear and dread or inspiration and generative behaviour. How easy it would be if we could address such a complex problem by saying, don't let the awareness of death leave you feeling anxious. Instead, be inspired to live a better, more generative life. Unfortunately, it does not work that way, and there would be a multitude of individual differences and external impacts we would have to control for before this would even be a possibility. The most important protective behaviour is to keep a close support network and try to participate in enjoyable activities daily. Death anxiety is understandable because death is a very scary concept. However, we must try to remember that each day we are given is a blessing and we should try to make the most of it.
Okay, what is exactly tarot management theory? According to McGregor, it's actually the assumption that humans and animals are similar in sharing the same evolutionary heritage, such as strong biological proclivity for life preservation and continued existence. And TMT is managed by two key opponents: cultural worldview, which is a reality sense of meaning, set of standards that help enable individuals to have a sense of personal value. If standards are met, it gives a literal or symbolic immorality, whereas self-esteem is living up to standards by cultural worldview. Hypotheses. As you can see, researchers find that MS, morality salient, leads to positive evaluations of those who validate one's worldview and negative evaluations to those who think otherwise. Hypotheses of study 1 is if morality salient will encourage aggression against a worldview threatener. People are most likely to favor those who share the same worldview and negatively to those who do not. Okay, guys, let's jump into it. We're going to get started with study number 1. As you can see, the sample size, there is 38 males and 36 females, all from the University of Arizona in a introductory psychology class. And they did the study because it was a partial fulfillment of the course. How these students got recruited was basically based off their political views. They were either conservative or liberal. And to jump in, the hot sauce paradigm, as you can see, it's similar to the shock paradigm. Participants' intentions were to cause physical harm to hurt others. If you remember Milgram's shock paradigm, every time the person got the answer wrong, the participant shocked them. And in this case, it was due to if they had different cultural worldviews, then the amount of hot sauce that was allocated was based on the political view. So I thought it was just the same as the shock paradigm. Procedures. So there were randomly assigned 2 conditions, MS versus control, and then worldview threatens versus worldview consistent. And they got divided into groups of 4s, and it was either all liberals or all conservatives participants. They had 2 experiments investigating the relationship between personality and attitudes. Participants were induced to think about their own death or the next time they had a very important exam. Participants then asked to read an essay that supposedly written earlier in the session that was derogatory towards either liberals or conservatives. Experimenters greeted the participants in a calm manner. Participants led to believe that they were in 2 experiments about relationships between personality and attitudes. The first experiment was basically they were examining relationships between personality traits and how impressions are formed of others. Then they had to write a short paragraph of their political stance in the U.S. After that, once they got done, they exchanged with another person within their group. Participants then went into an individual cubicle to write their paragraphs in 5 minutes. They didn't have to worry about spelling or grammar, and then they also had a sheet of paper with the instructions on it. After 5 minutes, participants received a packet that had 3 questionnaires that had to be answered in order. The experimenter explained to give their natural first response to the questions, so whatever they thought of, that was their first response. They were then asked to evaluate the essay, and they had to not be judgmental in any way, so it had to be a judgment-free zone. This was important because it gave them the opportunity to defend their worldview within themselves after reading their essay. So then participants were handed a bogus essay that was used to manipulate the worldview threats. After the first experiment, we're going to get into the second one, which is experimenter returned with a tray of hot sauce, plastic spoon, a cup with a lid, water, and a wooden spoon. Participants would be giving the sample of hot sauce to the person of the essay they had read earlier. Participants had the option to fill the 4-ounce cup up with as much hot sauce as they wanted. And these were the results. Sorry, my blue, like the blue part and the orange part cut out. So at the bottom, as you can see, the blue bar is the worldview threatening, and then the orange bar is the worldview consistent. And basically, participants were more likely to allocate the hot sauce in the cup, which then became weighted. So the weight of the cup actually weighted more than what the researchers would think. And then, as you can see from this chart, this was the morality salient by self-report estimates. And as you can see, the results produced the same pattern as the actual hot sauce allocation. So after they weighted it, I'm going to go back to this one, sorry. They weighted it, as you can see, the results were similar because then these were the self-reports, and as you can see, there was no significant change within the two. This chart is talking about the exam control by weight. Participants did not let the essay influence their choice of elucidating the hot sauce. As you can see, the world view threatening. Right here, the essay did not influence it at all. And as you get into the last chart, this is the exam control by self-reported estimates. The essay had no effect in the amount of the hot sauce being elucidated. As you can tell, both charts were similar, except for this one. This is where the hot sauce being elucidated in the self-report was more higher in this one than it was in this one. The results of the study supports the hypothesis of the hot sauce being elucidated if the person did not have the same worldview as the participant. As if you remember, if the participant had a certain cultural worldview, they would be more positive evaluating because they felt valid, compared to if the person had a different point of worldview, then the person would be evaluated in a negative way from the participant. As you can see, there was also no difference with the morality salient because there was no significant change within the hot sauce being elucidated. As you can see, the worldview consistent was higher in the exam control, but if you go back to the morality salient, the worldview threatening is like very high compared to the worldview consistent. So yeah, and then do you guys think this study meets the criteria for evil? Talking about the harm, did they mean to harm? Did the participants mean to harm? Did the participants intentionally mean to harm with the hot sauce? And was it excessive? As you can see from the results, the worldview threatening of the elevated hot sauce elucidated. Yes, as you can see, the results were the intentions were harmful, and then it was intentional, and it was excessive. From the worldview consistent of elevated hot sauce elucidated, you can see it was also it also met the criteria for being harmful, intentional, and excessive. If you want to jump back into the results, like I said, remember going back, the worldview threatening, the bar is very high for the moral salient, whereas for the exam control, the worldview threatening is a tad bit on the lower side compared to the worldview consistent. But overall, it does meet all three criterias. As you can see, the researchers' hypothesis is that participants would have a more positive evaluation of those who validated rather than those who seemed to have a different view. The hot sauce proved that if they felt threatened, then they would use the hot sauce to their advantage, knowing that the fear of the person was spicy food. Like I said back a couple slides, that participants would favor those who would validate their point rather than those who thought differently, so it caused them to think of them in a negative way. So I think with this study, if they didn't agree, then they got more hot sauce in their cup than what the experimenter wanted. Yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed my lecture. We don't actually have class next week, so enjoy your time off, and thank you for coming to the lecture, and have a good one. Before you guys leave, this is my reference, and bye.